up on Father's Day as a present. But Adam Derwitz in Counting Crows wanted it for his album cover, This Desert Life. I tried to get him to change the elements of it, anything, the colour of it, the clothes of the guy, anything, the direction the fish was swimming, anything. He wanted that. So I ended up just doing a new cover for the book the next time it was printed and etc. That's my cellist friend Matt Sharp, Hansgar. Lots of work for Frontline Assembly. Do we like Frontline Assembly as well? Yeah? Oh, excellent. Another fan. Good. I've done, again, about 15-20 years worth of work with Frontline Assembly, and it's lovely having this long-term relationship with a band. You build a world of work for them. The images become, sort of start to define the music, and we have a really strong, relationship. Rolling Stones, I did some work with, and Tori Amos. My first Photoshop job was Michael Nyman's The Piano. I made every mistake going. I'm amazed it even came out at all, but it did. And then this is the very last album I did for my Norwegian friend Stian Carstensen. And we did a long distance, this was again during lockdown, this is another lockdown project. I did some long distance film directing. All films should be made this way. So I sat at home in England, Stian is in Norway, and he just went out with a friend and shot footage, and sent it to me. And then I started to edit together and find a narrative in there, find a story. And to fill in the spaces, I then sent my order in for him to go off again and shoot more stuff, and he sent more footage and sent off again. And so it was fantastic. Why go out on a set or a miserable day on location? Just stay at home. So that's the end. This is album cover for I've got a record label. I started a record label with Ian Bellamy, who's a great jazz sax player. And this was our first release called Food. It's Norwegian avant-garde jazz. So it's not a big audience, but I love it. And we got a lovely review from some, because we did it in a box. You get the CD in a box with postcards, but also a little twist of pasta, or a bay leaf, or a dried chili, I included. And so somebody did a lovely review where they really liked the music, and they also said if you buy 50 copies you get a free meal for 2 out of it. Photography I discovered during the Sandman covers, and I've published 4 monographs of photographs now. And then I've had some little books here. Some people have bought my little books. Whenever I go to an interesting city, I sketch and take photographs. I make these little sketchbooks. It's where I teach myself how to draw, really, and try new things. So whenever I go to a new place, I publish one of these little books. This is Venice, Prague, and then also along the way I've done exhibitions, and I never really got on with exhibitions particularly, just putting a bunch of things in a big white room. But I found a way of doing narrative exhibitions, where there's a story in the space. And so there are drawings and paintings and things going on. But very, very quickly people realise, there is something to follow here. And they will go back to the beginning and track it through and stay with you, I think, much longer. And we've had some really emotional reactions to the stories in the room. So I really love this, sort of a comic in a room, really. This is the Coast Road. And then this was a project called Blue Tree, where the story was in the room, but also when the exhibition opened at 5 o'clock in the morning, I went around the town and planted little blue trees all over the town, so people woke up and they were everywhere. Couldn't escape me. And then getting close to the end now, thankfully, I wanted to make some films. I've always loved films, and I obviously, comics are my first love, but I miss the music, I miss the sound. So I wanted to make some films. Nobody's going to knock on my door and just give me some money to make a film. So I made some short films with just some friends, a crew of 3 and a couple of actors, and no budget. I just paid expenses, and so I had to keep it small. So the first short film is called The Week Before, and it's the week when God makes everything in the universe. but it's the week before God makes everything in the universe. So it's the week when God shows up on Monday morning with the best intentions of making everything in the universe, but can't think of anything, and just sort of puts it off and goes fishing, invites his neighbour, the devil, round for a game of cards, things like that. So it's about creativity, really. The other film was called Neon, which is a sort of melancholy ghost story set in Venice. So these films I put into festivals. They did quite well, won some prizes, and got me noticed by Lisa Henson, who is Jim Henson's daughter. Jim Henson made The Muppets and Labyrinth and Dark Crystal. So they had a deal, Lisa had a deal to make a feature film, fantasy film, for a tiny, tiny budget. And so she knew Neil Gaiman anyway. So Neil and I got together to pitch an idea for a film. We had 2 weeks to come up with something, to get it in, to get the nod that we, might get it made. So that's what we did. Spent a manic 2 weeks in London, and wrote this thing called Mirror Mask, which, and then, what should have happened was, we had handed it in. What should have happened was they should have said, okay, it's got some nice ideas in it, it's got some interesting things in it, go away for a decent amount of time, write it properly, take 3 months out and just write it properly. What they actually said was, great, here's a check, go and make that. That never happens. Nobody ever says that. So we sort of snatched the check and thought, okay, and then ran off and made it, but actually we really should have spent the 3 months writing it a bit more. Anyway, it got made. We had an amazing actress called Stephanie Leonidas, who's at the centre of the film. If anybody has ever seen it, she saved our lives. She is just a perfect actress and a lovely person. And then lots of blue screen and CG creatures, created with bleeding edge technology. Everything was failing. But I put together a little studio of 17 art students. They had never done a job before, let alone a film. And they were fantastic. They were not jaded by the industry at all. And they came bright-eyed and bushy-tailed and wanting to do good work. And they really delivered for me. That is a huge Gina McKee head. And then this is my second feature film. It's called Luna. Not many people have seen this one. It did do quite well in festivals, but never really got a proper release. But I'm actually happy with this one. Stephanie Leonidas is in it again, and some great actors. It's not a children's film. It's a much more serious film. It's inspired by some friends of mine who went through a terrible time. They lost a child, and they spoke to me 2 years later. They spoke to me about the grieving process, and I was so struck by that, and it really got under my skin. I just couldn't leave it alone. And I wrote a story just to put it somewhere, but I didn't really want to just tell their story. That didn't seem fair. It had to be interpreted in some way. So that's what Luna is. It's about grief. It takes place in this little house on the coast of Devon. And the life of the child who died is lived out in a strange series of dream sequences over one weekend. Okay, that man there is Bill Mitchell. Bill Mitchell is the most important person in my last 10 years, most inspiring. He ran the Wild Works theatre company in Cornwall, and I did 2 projects with him. He very sadly died 3 or 4 years ago, and I miss him dreadfully. He completely changed my way of working. Up until then, I was a total control freak. I needed everything sorted ahead of time before I started drawing my comics and things like that. Everything plotting out. Bill had a much more improvisational way of working. He would just get people together. He would find himself somewhere, in a wood, on the beach, in a house, in a museum, and he would just invite actors and musicians and artists and creatives, photographers, historians, people who work locally, everybody. We had a guy on one of our projects who lived with wolves for a year and taught us all to be a pack of wolves, hunting some actors dressed up as stags. It was fantastic. And he just improvises, and slowly a story evolves out of these workshops and play, and it's so alive and in the moment. I never wanted to do anything in such a tied down way again. I always wanted to work in that way. So Black Dog, the project I told you about, was created that way, leaving things completely open to the last minute. It's very scary. But you just have to trust that the sheer bloody adrenaline of it, and the fact that an audience is going to show up, something will happen, and it does, and it's wonderful, and it means you're alive to every little thing that changes and moves in the place. I love it. Anyway, so we did these two projects. This is Michael Sheen's The Gospel of Us. This was a 3-day live theatrical event. Michael Sheen played a Christ-like figure, but it was not a religious reading of the Easter story at all. A teacher who comes back to the town and plays out the Easter story in modern-day Wales, Port Talbot in Wales, which is Michael's hometown. It happened once only, and I went down there. I got to know Michael for other reasons, and he said he was doing this. And I said, it sounded great, why is nobody making a film of it? And he said, well, you do it. So I, okay, I'll do it. And then thought, oh, crap, what have I said? But the Welsh Film Board gave me a little budget to go down with 10 cameramen, basically documentary cameramen, to shoot it. And it started at 6 in the morning with one little man, 97-year-old man, who stood up and sang a hymn to prayer as the sun came up over the horizon, to an audience of 4 people, and a dog, and me with my camera. And at 6 in the morning, or 6:30 in the morning, Michael appeared as the stranger on the beach, as these people had been spotted in the town. And about 300 people came down to see him being baptized in the sea. I included little bits of animation in the film version, in between sequences. That's the Last Supper. And so Michael stayed in character for 3 days solid. He slept on the mountain, he slept in a police cell overnight when he was arrested. And we just shot it, and I had a vague plan of what to do, very vague, because I didn't really know what was going to happen, but I'd seen some of the dress rehearsals. But as soon as an audience shows up, and at its peak 20,000 people showed up, and paparazzi showed up, getting in the way of everything, my new plan was just shoot anything. Anything that moves, shoot that, and I'll take all the footage home and try and make a film out of it. So that's what we did. And obviously it ends with Michael lugging a huge crucifix through the centre of Port Talbot for 3 hours, with everybody with their mobile phones out, you know, watching him go. Nobody wanted to look at him because this bloodied man is such a strange image. So everybody was looking through their phones and their devices, and the atmosphere was very strange and disturbing, like a Buñuel movie, you know. But then by the end of it, he was crucified on a roundabout by the sea. To